The kingdom of Coralion gleamed like a dream beneath the surface of the sea. Coral towers stretched toward the pale glow of the sun, their tips glittering with barnacle-crusted jewels. Schools of fish darted through spirals of kelp, weaving color into the turquoise waters. To the eyes of the merfolk, this place was the center of the world, the jewel of the sea mother herself. Pearl swam through the grand palace corridor, her long hair floating behind her like strands of silver spun from the moon. Pearlescent scales covered her tail, shimmering with a radiance that made courtiers stop and stare as she passed. Beauty was currency in Coralion, and Pearl was as rich as they came. Beside her swam her younger sister, Melodious, her tail a cascade of opal light. She was smaller, gentler, and adored by all. The sisters were as different as sunlight and twilight, but together they completed a picture of grace that the kingdom worshipped. "Father expects us at court," Melodious murmured, straightening her posture as two guards bowed low. Pearl's lips curved with mischief. "Let him wait a little. He always does." "Pearl," Melodious' voice carried warning, though her eyes softened with affection. Pearl smirked but obeyed, sweeping into the throne hall. There, the king sat upon a coral throne entwined with golden seaweed. His tail gleamed with the deep radiance of lineage, proof of divine blessing. He raised his hand, calling for silence. The nobles of Coralion were gathered, each shimmering more brilliantly than the last, their tails flashing like blades of light. To them, beauty was not vanity, it was legitimacy. A radiant tail was proof of the sea mother's favor, and thus, proof of one's right to rule, to lead, to command. Those with dull or imperfect tails were deemed cursed, unworthy, cast out. Pearl had always accepted this truth, as natural as the tides. Until that night. The court had barely ended when Pearl slipped away. Her father's voice still rang in her ears, lecturing on duty, warning against rashness, praising Ocean. Ocean! He was everything a noble should be, tall, broad-shouldered, his tail like a stream of molten sapphire. When he swam, light bent toward him, dazzled by his radiance. Yet something in his eyes unsettled Pearl, a hunger sharp enough to wound. He spoke often of tradition, of purity, of keeping Coralion free of weakness. And the nobles applauded him. Pearl wanted to clap her hands to her ears. So she fled, out of the palace, past the reefs, into the night. The sea grew darker as she swam farther from Coralion's glow. Strange weeds twisted around jagged rocks, and fish with luminous eyes slithered into cracks at her passing. The currents tugged at her, warning her back. But Pearl was restless. She wanted to breathe. Her body moved on instinct, darting between towering spires of stone. She imagined, foolishly, that she was free from the weight of her crown, free from her father's gaze, free from Ocean's smile. But then the water stirred. A shadow slithered between the rocks, longer than 10 merfolk tails. Scales like knives gleamed faintly in the dark. Eyes, vast and gleaming, fixed upon her. Pearl froze. The abyssal serpent uncoiled, its maw opening wide, rows of teeth flashing. She bolted, her tail beating furiously, but the creature surged after her, a wall of darkness in motion. The palace lights were far behind. No one would hear her screams. The serpent lunged. And then, something struck it. Hard. A blur darted past Pearl, wrapping around the serpent's neck. Not a tail, but writhing limbs, 8 of them, each powerful as a tide. The serpent thrashed, slamming its body against stone, but the figure clung on, striking with precision. Pearl tumbled back, her chest heaving. She had never seen such a sight. The figure was a merman, and yet not. His torso was broad, strong, his skin marked with scars. But where a tail should have gleamed, there spread 8 muscular tentacles, dark as midnight, curling and striking with terrifying grace. An outcast. Pearl's blood went cold. The serpent writhed, snapping its jaws. One tentacle lashed around its fanged maw, forcing it shut. Another struck at its eyes. The creature screeched, twisting violently, until at last it fled into the abyssal dark, vanishing like smoke. Silence. The merman released his grip, letting his limbs drift. His chest heaved. Slowly, he turned toward Pearl. Their eyes met. Pearl's heart pounded. She wanted to flee, but her body refused. She was torn between horror and awe. "You're safe now," he said at last, his voice low, steady. She flinched. The words were gentle, but his appearance was monstrous. 8 limbs where there should be 1 tail. No shimmer, no beauty. Cursed. Why would you save me?" she whispered, voice trembling. He looked at her for a long moment. In his gaze, she saw no bitterness, no triumph. Only quiet resolve. "Because," he said softly, "even those who scorn me still bleed. And I cannot watch another life torn away by the depths." Pearl's throat closed. Shame prickled her skin, though she could not name it. She stared at him, at the strength in his limbs, the steadiness of his eyes. And for the first time, she wondered if beauty was truly the same as worth. But then his gaze shifted, and his expression hardened. "You should go," he said. "Your kind doesn't linger with mine." She opened her mouth, but no words came. Before she could speak, he was gone, disappearing into the dark currents with a sweep of his limbs. Pearl floated there, trembling, her thoughts a tangled storm. Her whole life, she had been told outcasts were cursed, unworthy, dangerous. Yet one had saved her when all others were far away. She could still feel the phantom grip of those tentacles pulling her to safety. She could still hear his voice, calm, unyielding, sorrowful. Pearl turned back toward Coralion, but the waters that once gleamed with perfection now felt hollow. Her reflection in the palace windows no longer dazzled her. For the first time, she wondered if her radiance was only a veil, blinding her to the truth. The next day, Coralion shone as always, but Pearl's heart was heavy. Her father spoke of Ocean's promises to protect the kingdom. His nobles crooned about purity and light. Melodious smiled, radiant, as if the world was whole. But Pearl could not forget the darkness, nor the outcast who had reached into it to save her. She swam to her chambers, closed her eyes, and whispered his words again. "Even those who scorn me still bleed." Her chest ached. She pressed her hand against her heart, as though trying to steady it. And though fear clawed at her, she knew one thing with startling certainty. She would find him again. Pearl should have forgotten him. It would have been safer to let the memory of the outcast drift away like bubbles rising into the tide. Safer to cling to the life she knew. Glittering halls, obedient smiles, her sister's laughter, her father's stern pride. But when she closed her eyes, she saw him. The way his limbs had struck against the abyssal serpent, fluid and strong. The way his voice had held neither anger nor envy, only quiet truth. "Even those who scorn me still bleed." The words clung to her, pulling her deeper than any current. 2 nights later she slipped away again. The palace guards assumed the princess wandered only among coral gardens, but Pearl darted farther, past the reefs, into the darker waters. Her heart hammered as she swam, searching the shadows. And then he appeared. Calypso. He emerged cautiously, as though expecting a spear aimed at his heart. But when his eyes found hers, he stilled. "You," he murmured, "you shouldn't be here." Pearl straightened her spine, though her voice trembled. "Neither should you. You saved me. I came to thank you." He laughed, bitter and hollow. A princess of Coralion, thanking an outcast. The currents must be broken. "I was wrong," Pearl said, "about your kind." Calypso tilted his head, tentacles curling idly in the water. "You were not wrong. Most of us are broken, scarred, banished, forgotten. But we are not monsters." Her chest tightened. Nobles called them monsters, abominations, cursed children of the abyssal father. She had believed it once. She had repeated those words with pride. Now, in his presence, they tasted like poison. "You are braver than any noble I know," she whispered. For the first time, his expression softened. Something unspoken passed between them, fragile as a seashell, sharp enough to cut. That night they spoke until dawn painted the waves above. And the night after. And the night after that. Pearl learned his name, Calypso. He lived among the outcasts clinging to the edges of the abyss, their homes carved into black stone. He told her of the cruelty of Coralion's laws, of children cast away for tales too dull, of mothers who wept as they were forced to abandon their young. Pearl's heart ached. She wanted to argue, to defend her kingdom, but the words dissolved before they reached her lips. And Calypso listened to her, too. Not as a princess, but as a soul. He teased her for her curiosity, admired her wit, and when she confessed her longing to be free of her crown, he nodded as though he had always known. One night, drifting among kelp forests, Pearl plucked small sea flowers and wove them gently around his limbs. "There," she whispered. "Now you look radiant." Calypso froze, staring at the flowers, at her, at the softness in her eyes. His throat worked as if words had tangled there. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "No one has ever looked at me like that." Pearl smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. "Then they were blind." But while she found secret joy in the shadows, darkness spread in Coralion. Ocean's voice carried through the court like a hymn, urging the nobles toward purity, toward strength, toward fear. "The outcasts," he declared one morning, his sapphire tail blazing in the throne hall's light, "are not merely cursed. They are dangerous. They spread weakness like disease. We must cut them away, for the safety of all." The nobles roared in approval. Even the king, weary though he was, did not silence him. Pearl felt her stomach twist. She wanted to rise, to shout that Ocean was wrong, but her father's gaze pinned her still. His eyes were tired, heavy with the weight of ruling, and she could almost hear his words, "You must think of the kingdom, not your heart." So she held her tongue, and her silence burned. When the festival of radiance arrived, Coralion glittered brighter than ever. Tails flashed like jewels as merfolk danced in spirals of color, weaving light into the currents. Pearls and shells rained from above, music thrummed from choral drums, and everywhere laughter rang. But not all shared in the joy. The outcasts were forbidden to attend, banished from the celebration as though their very presence might dim the light. Pearl floated among the dancers, her smile fixed, her heart aching. Every laugh felt hollow, every shimmer of a tale an empty boast. She thought of Calypso, far away in the dark, and shame burned in her chest. Then Ocean appeared, radiant as a god, his voice rising above the music. "My people, tonight we honor our radiance, proof of the sea mother's love. And tonight, we must remember those who threaten it." The crowd stilled, rapt. The outcasts grow bold, Ocean cried. They whisper rebellion. They consort with shadows. If we do not act, they will poison our kingdom. Pearl's blood ran cold. He was lying, she knew it. Calypso and his kin wanted only to survive. But the crowd roared, swept by fear and beauty. Ocean's eyes found hers across the throng. His smile widened, sharp as a blade. In that moment she knew, he was not content with words. He wanted power. It happened swiftly. Too swiftly for Pearl to comprehend. The king was found lifeless in his chambers, his scales dimmed, his crown shattered. Ocean emerged cloaked in grief, proclaiming sorrow, swearing vengeance against unseen foes. The nobles, desperate for a voice of strength, turned to him. And Melodious, sweet, gentle Melodious, was at his side. "Pearl," her sister whispered, eyes brimming with tears, "you don't understand. Ocean will protect us. He will protect the kingdom. Father, he was weak. We need someone stronger." Pearl staggered back as if struck. "You cannot mean this. Melodious, he killed him." Her sister flinched, but did not move away from Ocean's side. Ocean's gaze burned into Pearl's, cold and triumphant. "She consorts with outcasts," he said to the court. "She brings filth into our sacred halls. She is no princess, she is a traitor." The words spread like blood in the water. Nobles recoiled. Guards hesitated. And Pearl's world shattered. They came for her that night. Pearl fled, her tears mingling with the sea, her heart breaking with every beat. Behind her, Coralion blazed with light, but it felt darker than the abyss. Calypso found her drifting near the trenches, trembling, broken. "They killed him," she choked. "My father. And Melodious, she chose him." Calypso's arms wrapped around her, steady, unyielding. His limbs curled protectively, shielding her from the cold currents. "I have nothing," she whispered. "No home, no crown, no sister." He pressed his forehead to hers, his voice low but fierce. "You have me, and you are not finished, Pearl. The tides are not yet written." She stared into his eyes, into the strength there, into the love unspoken but blazing. Her grief twisted into something sharper. "Vengeance. I will make him pay," she whispered, her voice steadying. "For my father. For my people. For everything he has taken." Calypso nodded. "Then we will rise together." As the current swirled around them, carrying the scent of salt and sorrow, Pearl swore an oath. Ocean had stolen her crown, but she would take back the sea. Exile tasted of salt and silence. Pearl drifted among the trenches with Calypso and the outcasts, her once radiant scales dimmed, her crown shattered in all but memory. The abyss whispered to her in her dreams, luring her with promises of vengeance. She often woke with her fists clenched, nails digging into her palms, heart hammering with the desire to tear Ocean apart with her own hands. "You are not the abyss," Calypso murmured one night as she shook awake from another dream of blood and shadow. He wrapped his arms and limbs around her, steady as the roots of a coral tree. "Do not let it make a home in you." "I want to destroy him," Pearl whispered, voice cracking. "I want to see him drown in the dark." "Then you will," Calypso said softly, pressing his forehead to hers. "But not at the cost of yourself. You are light, Pearl. Even here, in the deepest waters, you shine. That is why I believe in you. That is why they will follow you." She thought of the outcasts, the broken, the shamed, the unwanted. They had always lurked at the edges of Coralion, too afraid to rise, too beaten down to believe they had worth. But when Pearl looked at them now, she did not see weakness. She saw strength, born of surviving scorn. She saw loyalty, born of knowing pain. She saw a people waiting for someone to tell them they mattered. So Pearl stood before them. Her voice carried through the water, trembling at first but growing steady. They cast you aside because your scales did not glitter. They called you cursed. They told you that you were not worthy. But I have learned the truth. You are more than worthy. You are the tide that cannot be stopped. The kingdom belongs to you as much as to any noble draped in jewels. The outcasts stirred, their eyes widening. Pearl raised her chin, fire burning in her chest. I have lost my father to ocean's cruelty. I have lost my home to his lies. But I have not lost my will. I will fight, and I ask you to fight with me, not for my crown, but for a future where no child is thrown away for the shape of their tail, where no heart is shamed for how it beats, where we all belong. Silence stretched. Then, one by one, the outcasts raised their voices. A vow of loyalty, of defiance, of hope. They swam closer, circling her, until Pearl felt herself at the center of a rising storm. For the first time since her father's death, she did not feel broken. She felt whole. Beside her, Calypso's eyes shone with pride. "Now," he said, "we take back the sea." In Coralion, Ocean's throne gleamed with stolen light. He had wrapped the crown of the merfolk in abyssal coral, twisting its beauty into a mockery. Beside him floated Melodious, draped in silks of pearl, her tail glittering like moonlight. Her smile was practiced, her eyes shadowed. Ocean ruled not with kindness, but with fear. Nobles who questioned him were silenced. Outcasts were hunted, some executed publicly as warnings. The streets of Coralion grew quieter, the music of its people fading into dread. Yet Ocean stood triumphant, feeding on their terror. When word reached him that Pearl still lived, fury lanced through him. "Then she will die before all," he snarled, his abyssal power curling like smoke around his body. "The people will see her ruin, and they will know their queen is me." The storm began the night Pearl and the outcasts rose from the trenches. Currents churned, waves thundered, lightning split the skies above. The sea itself seemed to sense the coming reckoning. Armed with tridents salvaged from forgotten ruins and armor woven of kelp and shell, the outcasts surged forward like a dark tide, with Pearl at their head. Coralion sentries sounded alarms as they approached, but the people gathered in the throne hall were not prepared for the sight of an army of outcasts flooding their sacred city. Pearl's voice rang through the chaos. "Ocean! Your reign ends tonight." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Ocean rose from the throne, his smile sharp, his sapphire tail gleaming with an unnatural glow. "Sister," he mocked, his voice carrying like poison. "How kind of you to return. Did you come to kneel?" Pearl lifted her trident. "I came to take back what you stole." The battle erupted. The hall became a maelstrom of flashing tails and writhing limbs, of tridents clashing against spears, of cries of rage and defiance. Pearl fought at Calypso's side, their movements seamless. She struck high while his limbs swept low, entangling foes, pulling them off balance. Where one faltered, the other steadied. Every glance, every brush of hands, was a promise. "I will not let you fall." Nobles loyal to Ocean tried to hold their ground, but the outcasts fought with a fury born of centuries of shame. Coralion shook with the force of their rising. At the heart of the chaos, Pearl and Ocean collided. His abyssal power lashed out, tendrils of shadow that seared the water, but Pearl met him strike for strike, her trident blazing with determination. The duel spiraled through the hall, shattering coral pillars, sending shards of shell and light cascading. "You are nothing without me," Ocean snarled. "You were always weak, clinging to your father's side, blinded by sentiment. You think these wretches will crown you queen? They will drag you down the moment you falter." Pearl's arms trembled with the force of his blows, but she met his gaze steadily. "A queen is not made by jewels or fear. A queen is made by loyalty. And they will stand with me, because I stand with them." Ocean roared and struck, his abyssal magic surging. Pearl faltered, the shadows clawing at her skin, her vision blurring. Her strength wavered, and for a moment she thought the abyss would consume her. And then Melodious moved. She darted between them, her body catching the full brunt of Ocean's attack. The hall gasped as the light around her shattered, her silks burning away, her scales cracking with the force. "Melodious!" Pearl cried, reaching for her. Her sister turned, tears in her eyes, lips trembling with regret. "I was blind, Pearl. I thought Ocean could protect us. I thought he was strong where father was weak. But I see now, he is only wrought. I was wrong. Forgive me." Ocean's face twisted in rage. "Traitor!" With her last strength, Melodious raised her hands and pressed them against Ocean's chest. Light flared, drawn from the fragments of her own fading radiance. The abyss shrieked, recoiling from the brilliance. Ocean staggered, his power unraveling. "Now, Pearl!" Melodious gasped. Pearl's scream tore from her throat as she thrust her trident forward. It pierced Ocean's chest, shattering the abyssal coral wrapped around him. The shadows shrieked and writhed, dragging him down. Ocean's scream echoed through the hall as he was pulled into the depths, his form dissolving into darkness. When silence fell, Melodious collapsed into Pearl's arms. Her body was dim, her light fading. "You saved us," Pearl whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You saved me." Melodious smiled faintly, her hand brushing Pearl's cheek. "Be the queen our people need. Promise me." "I promise," Pearl choked. Her sister's hands slipped away, her body dissolving into soft glimmers of light that drifted upward like stars. The hall was silent, every eye on Pearl. She rose slowly, her heart broken, her trident still blazing with the last of her sister's light. The outcasts gathered around her, the nobles bowing their heads. All of Coralion seemed to wait. Pearl's voice rang steady through the silence. "No more will radiance blind us. No more will we cast aside those who do not glitter. From this day forward, Coralion belongs to all its children. Loyalty will bind us, not beauty." A murmur rippled through the crowd, then a cheer, rising like a wave. Outcasts and nobles alike raised their voices. And when Pearl turned to Calypso, she took his hand before all, her gaze unwavering. "You called him cursed," she said to her people. "I call him mine, and he will stand beside me as king." Gasps sounded, but no one dared defy her. In Calypso's eyes she saw awe, devotion, and love as deep as the sea. Days later, Coralion shone anew. The scars of battle remained, but the city hummed with hope. Outcasts walked openly among the coral streets, their laughter mingling with the nobles. The tides of change had begun. In the quiet of dawn, Pearl swam through the coral gardens with Calypso. The reefs glowed with soft light, fish darting in playful arcs. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. "Do you think it will last?" she asked softly. Calypso squeezed her hand. "So long as we hold to each other, it will." Pearl smiled, her heart steady. For the first time since the night her father died, she felt at peace. And as they drifted together through the shimmering waters, Pearl knew this truth. Even in the darkest depths, love could outshine the abyss.